the line with us right now is a gentleman whose voice and face you've seen now on New Orleans television, I believe, since 1978, and he's gotten to know the Saints organization pretty well. Jim Henderson, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, William. Thank you.
Oh, good. Now, well, we want to get you on the show to talk about a very special man in Saints history, and Jim Finks. And, well, this may seem like a simple question. I know you could probably give many answers, but what stands out in your mind about Jim Finks' legacy with the New Orleans Saints?
Well, there's so many things, William. I knew him on a lot of different levels, and I think probably the thing that stands out the most in my mind is leadership and integrity, because he had a world of both.
Very much so. And, of course, the gentleman who came in and had a lot of success with the Vikings and Bears, and 1 year with the Chicago Cubs before he came into New Orleans. When he first came in, I believe the date was January 14th, 1986, what were your first impressions of him?
How smooth he was and how much he knew about everybody's business. Jim was probably the most well-rounded person that will ever be in a general manager's position again in the NFL. He had been there as a player, been there as a scout, been there as a coach, had been in public relations, had been in the media, had worked in baseball in a front office capacity. So he really, truly did know everybody's job and the entire scope of things. And he was a great man about bringing everybody into the fold. He would bring in the groundskeeper as much as he would the head coach. He made you all feel a part of it, and he was a very special man. I've been in this business for 31 years, and I've never met anybody in sports that I respected more than him on a number of different levels.
And I think also, too, something to bring out, which, you know, maybe some people may have forgotten about, he was always really good under adversity. The one thing I'll remember most, if you want to call this adversity, was the two Bobby Hebert situations. A really elongated holdout in 1990, and, of course, his dismissal in 1993, where he later would go on with Atlanta. And I don't know if you share the same opinion, but it seems like Jim Finks, even though he was put in a really difficult spot in both situations, that he really came across very calm, very smooth about it.
Well, I never saw him rattled, and Jim was not infallible. And I think if you look back to 1990, he probably, to a degree, his own stubbornness cost the Saints a chance to go farther than they ever would have in the playoffs with the defense they had then and a decent offense. If Bobby Hebert had been the quarterback of that team, they might very well have gone to the Super Bowl instead of John Forgate and Steve Walsh. So, like most people in sports, Jim thought he knew how to do things, and stubbornness is not necessarily a fault in this business. And to a degree, he could be stubborn, but you always knew where he stood, and you knew that he had a plan, and he was not going to waver from that plan. And I remember one of the favorite sayings he had, and he had a number of them, was, "Just keep sawing wood." You brought up those two incidences with Bobby Hebert. I think the thing that I remember most about Jim Finks, among a lot of things, is when he didn't become the commissioner of the NFL, and Paul Tagliabue did. I covered those meetings in Chicago, and Jim's whole family was there. They had reserved a suite. It was all furnished and all decked out for a party. And at the last second, Jim Finks wasn't the commissioner of the NFL, and Paul Tagliabue was. And he was back at work at his desk at Saints camp on Monday like nothing had ever happened.
Well, very much so. It goes to show you how much of a keen sense of responsibility he had as well. He had mentioned, in fact, I happened to dig this up before you came on, that when he said that he was not going to be commissioner of the league, he was actually offered the first presidency of the NFL, but he had turned it down because he thought the title was a little bit uncertain as to responsibilities. And like you just said, hop back in that chair Monday morning and got ready, I think, for the next game, which I believe was at Atlanta, if I'm correct.
Well, you never know what the NFL would have been like under Jim Finks instead of Paul Tagliabue. Jim Finks was from a different era, and he was from the time when the game was the most important thing. Paul Tagliabue with a law background. He came in when an awful lot of franchises that had original owners who were mostly in it for the sport, and they had the money. Their franchises had grown appreciably as far as how much they were now worth. A lot of those people were being phased out, and you had the new owners in Philadelphia and elsewhere, and these people had bought their franchises at a high price, and they were interested in making money and maximizing profit. And that was not what Jim Finks was about. He was about the original spirit of the NFL, which for the most part was a bunch of wealthy people, although not nearly as wealthy as today's owners, who were in it for the sport, the camaraderie, and doing the right thing for the league. Remember another thing, and I could go on for hours about Jim Finks, but another thing I remember when we were in Atlanta when Deion Sanders was there, and they introduced the Falcons, and they had all the fake smoke and the dry ice and the fog machines, and Dion came out doing his dance, and Jim Finks was just appalled, because to him, the NFL was all about the team. It was not the glorification of the individual, and I guess we'll never get back to those days. I recall him so fondly. He was a terrific competitor on the tennis court. He always liked to play as early as you could possibly play in the morning, because Jim was not a night owl. Jim went to bed early, and he got up early, and that was not exactly the role of the media. So whenever I played him in tennis, he always wanted to play at the crack of dawn. And, of course, he was the general manager of the team, so I always tried to accommodate him if we were in lacrosse or wherever. And usually he kicked my butt. Once in a while I beat him, but he was a really tough competitor. Late in the afternoon, when we were on the road, especially with the Saints, in preseason when we did their games, all our guys that traveled, that didn't get a chance to travel very much with the Saints and wouldn't travel during the regular season, they were just so enamored of the fact that he would want them to get together for cocktails, and we used to call it Drinks with Finks. And it was usually about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Jim's day was winding down, and he would pour himself a couple of see-throughs, as he called them, a couple of vodkas on the rocks, and he would just regale you with tale after tale after tale about all he had done in the NFL and elsewhere, never trying to command the stage, but always just trying to make everybody have a good time, which he very much did. I can remember sitting with him in the golf cart up at Lacrosse or over at Hammond, and we had some mutual friends. He and Hank Stram went a long ways back, and I knew Hank, and I'd worked with Hank, and Hank's a character, and Jim coached with him way back at Notre Dame under Terry Brennan in the mid-'50s, so he knew a lot of Hank Stram stories too. And I never felt better than when I could make Jim Finks laugh, and I could see that sparkle light up his Irish eyes. And to make Jim Finks laugh in those situations, sitting in a golf cart on the side of the field at a Saints practice, you pretty much felt like you were on top of the world. So I missed the man greatly, and I think he was just one of the very best people and very best administrators I've ever met.
And, of course, I do remember the tennis story, because back, and I did save it on tape from '89, you had mentioned playing tennis against him on radio, and Archie Manning had said that something to the effect that, you just threw the game to please the boss.
Not true. I tried to beat his ass whenever I could, and I didn't do it very often. He was a good player.
Mm-hmm.
He used to play down at the Hilton all the time with Lester Kabikoff, Cabby, the guy that really started the Hilton. He was in a morning game there. They play indoors like at 5:30, 6 in the morning. And unfortunately, Jim was a smoker, and I think most of his family would tell you that was the worst thing he ever did. And I would only hope that people who are similarly inclined would realize what it meant to the NFL and to the Saints to rob both of them of a man who went far too early, who still had a lot of good years left, because that was one of his problems, that he had very few, but an addiction to cigarettes eventually cost him his life and cost us a great man.
Very much so, and of course, his passing, which of course the 10th anniversary will be this Saturday, it's hard to believe it's been that long since he's left us.
Yeah, I remember going to his wake out in Metairie, and all the great people that were lined up there. You know, everybody, I'd never met anybody, and I knew Paul Horning when I did the games with Notre Dame. He knew Jim, because Jim was actually a coach at Notre Dame, as I said at the time that Paul was there. Everybody I ever met, if you mentioned Jim Finks' name, I never heard one person say anything that could be even remotely described as detrimental about his character. He was a real leader. I think the thing about Jim that was so impressive to me was he knew where you stood. This is the way it was going to be. Right or wrong, he was going to pull the trigger. He was going to make the decision. If it was wrong, it was wrong. And so few people since then have been like that. And recently, the people that replaced him were so concerned about where they stood, not making a mistake, playing political games. When Jim came to the Saints, Tom Benson was a new owner, and he had no clue. And he turned it over to Jim Finks, and Jim Finks said to him, Tom, here's the deal. I'm going to run it the way I think it should be run. The minute you have the first problem with that, I'm gone. I don't need this, but I'll do it out of friendship to you and out of an obligation to you, and because I still love the business. But as soon as you think that I'm not doing the right thing, no hard feelings, I'm out of here, and that never happened.
Welcome back to Body Sports Talk here on 0640 KTIB. This is William Taylor, and the last couple of weeks we've been promoting the Come Tee Off on Autism, Macy Ann May Celebrity Golf Tournament. Macy's father, Michael, the former LSU and New Orleans Saints player, has been running this tournament now in its second year. And the other day we had a chance to talk to Michael, and
I asked him, how old was Macy when he first thought that she may have some kind of special condition?
We started since James probably around age 2. And as time went on, we kind of got some opinions from different people, and they kind of hinted that